My name is Jim Costa. I'm an evolutionary biologist and historian of science. I'm based at Western Carolina University in North Carolina. I also direct the Highlands Biological Station, biological field station of Western Carolina University. My interest in my research interests kind of range from insect social evolution to the history of evolutionary thinking. And I had the privilege of writing about two seemingly disparate artifacts, Darwin's vasculum, as well as two leaves from the Worms book manuscript. And on the surface of it, they seem like a sort of unusual pairing of artifacts. But actually, I saw a real resonance there. You know, a vasculum is a protective case, usually a metal case, and this vasculum accompanied Darwin on the voyage of the Beagle in the 1830s, and would have been used extensively to collect plant material and store them in the vasculum until he could properly press them when he got back on the ship. And so I think of that as sort of one form of exploration with Darwin, you know, a form of exploration that took him around the world, collecting specimens, studying them, analyzing them, gaining insights into the natural world. The Worms manuscript is a rather different kind of exploration, a bit of an exploration of the mind. Darwin, once he returned from the voyage of the Beagle, never really left home again. In 1842, he and his then young family moved to Down House. That became his home south of London for 40 years. But he embarked upon a whole fascinating range of experiments and studies just right there at his home and in the surrounding meadows and woodlands. And worm studies, earthworms, actually, in an interesting way, bookend his 40 years of these interesting experiments. Some of his earliest published studies on worms were from the 1830s, where he was looking at worms as a geological force. He returned to that subject in the 1870s, just fascinated by how humble little earthworms, in their untold multitudes underground, could shape the landscape that we see. And along the way, he became very much interested in sort of the worms as organisms, as sentient beings. He became interested in their mental faculties and seeing in the humble worm kind of the glimmerings of features of intelligence and even emotion that we associate with more complex organisms. So it's interesting that the worms were among Darwin's very earliest study organisms, and is actually also then the subject of his very last book, published just before his death. I think of these two complementary voyages of discovery of Darwin's, one in a very literal physical sense, traveling around the world, and the other more learning how to see in his very own woodlands and meadows. I'm reminded of a quote from Proust where Proust suggested that real voyages of discovery need not entail traveling to distant lands, but often entail really learning how to see even familiar landscapes with new eyes. And I think that these two artifacts, the vasculum on the one hand and these leaves from the Worms manuscript on the other, really represent in complementary ways Darwin's way of learning how to see even familiar landscapes with very new eyes.